Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
Hello there, very good morning and welcome to Newsline. My name is Sonali Vanikabadike and joining us this morning is the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Public Enterprise Development, Eran Vikramaratne. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's very nice to see you after seeing you at the AmCham luncheon. You were also on fire in addition to the Prime Minister?
Well, I didn't realize I was on fire, just answering questions.
Great. Okay, so Deputy Minister, tell me, the Ministry of Public Enterprise Development was established in August 2015. What really is the mandate of this ministry? I mean, the words are a little obscure.
Yeah, traditionally, state enterprises are put under different ministries. The government has more than 250 state enterprises. These may collectively roughly have made over a period of time, over a 10-year period, about a 600 billion rupee loss. So this, if you want, is a new ministry in a sense and a bit of an experiment in lumping some of these together and then focusing on them and seeing whether we can bring the losses down, make services more efficient and more customer or citizen friendly. That's the mandate.
There's an allegation leveled at the government by certain parties that this incumbent government is interested in selling off loss-making state enterprises and privatizing them. Do you think there's any truth to these allegations?
Yes, Sonali, the first thing I would like to say is I would like to question this whole idea of selling. Why is anybody concerned about selling? Why have they put this germ in the public mind? So, Sonali, we have Sri Lankan Airlines as an example. It has accumulated losses of 140 billion. Every year, when you go to the market, the supermarket, wherever, you're paying taxes and you are paying for the losses of the state enterprises. There are 6,000 employees there, but there are 21 million customers in this country. I fly, right? And when I fly, I buy a ticket. Those people who go to the market are subsidizing my ticket when they really pay for the losses. Really, I want to really ask this question, why people pose this question is why selling state enterprise or state assets. These are actually not assets. These are negative net worth companies. I said it in Parliament that I was willing to give this for 1 rupee or $1 to the former President Mahinda Rajapaksa for spreading such economic falsehood. And they keep saying this thing about selling, Sonali. It is they who sold the Sri Lanka Telecoms company, right? I'm glad they did, because today everybody has a mobile phone, everybody has a computer in their hand or a smartphone in their hand. They liberalized the market. We're not opposed to it. Ultimately, it's not selling or buying, it's whether the customer gets a service, a good service at an efficient price. It is they. In the Colombo port, we have several container terminals. We have the Sri Lanka Ports Authority terminal. Then they created a terminal called SAGT, which is owned by Sri Lankan and foreign interests, private sector. The government of Sri Lanka has only 15% of that. Who sold that? It was the Rajapaksa regime. Then 13 years later, they created another container terminal called CICT, which is Chinese company owned, 85% Chinese company owned. Sri Lanka government has only 15%. Who sold it? The former regime. Did we oppose it? We didn't, because we look at the economy as a whole and we look at it whether it brings a return to the Sri Lankan public. Is it in the interest of the public? We didn't oppose it. I like to know these people who are talking about opposing these things. Were they there when these terminals were being given to foreigners, holding boards, opposing, protesting? Were they there? They were not there. And the reason they were not there is because there was a culture of fear. Society was controlled by the use of fear. Today, when we are negotiating the Hambantota port and we are saying that we will take 20%, we will give the foreign company 80%, they're making a huge issue about we are selling national assets. Everything we do, right, is to reduce the losses, to give the Sri Lankan consumer and citizen a better life and a better deal. As a policy, anyway, our government will not sell land as a policy. We lease land. If you think about it, you think about the golf face, and you think about the prime land behind the SWRD Bandaranaike statue. It was the headquarters of the Sri Lankan army. It was sold by the Rajapaksa regime, outright sale. Sold the Sri Lankan Army headquarters to a Chinese company. We didn't oppose it. We didn't oppose it because if it's going to be returns to this country, it's going to create jobs, it's going to create incomes. We didn't oppose it. So this idea that this government is selling is an absolutely false idea. We are looking at economic returns.
But Mr. Vikramaratne, are you not of the opinion that certain industries or sectors need to remain, the control of which needs to remain with the state sector and not be given to the private sector or to overseas interests? What's your take on that?
I think it's a very dangerous idea, right? It's a very dangerous idea. The idea should be is what is the service, is the customer getting a good service? If the Sri Lankan private sector can provide a better service at a more efficient service, good quality at a price, we are for the Sri Lankan private sector. We want this country to prosper. I think the state has a role. The state's primary role is in regulating, in making sure that consumers get a good deal, a very high standard and quality is maintained, the environment is protected. That's the primary role of the state. In addition to that, the state can be in what it might call strategic industries where it needs to hold ownership. In those we will certainly hold ownership. There are lots of things, from selling shoes to consumer items and things like that, which the state really doesn't need to do it. You will do a better job than the state on those.
All right. Mr. Vikramaratne, you are a business professional who came into politics to make a change for the better. Are you seeing this change, or are you a part of this change process?
Of course, I'm a bit of a dreamer. I'm an idealist. That's why I gave up my banking career to come into politics. At the same time, I thought about it quite a lot before I came in, and I realized that one or two people may not be able to make the change, that you need a critical number of people. However, I thought that at least, coming in, and if I'm able to even influence a small change, that might still be worth it. So I would say, honestly, reflecting on the past few years, that not much has changed, little has changed. I would certainly like to see a far more rapid progression, or more rapid change, which we haven't really seen.
Mr. Vikramaratne, the point is that on the 8th of January 2015, the people voted in for a change because they saw rampant corruption, they saw so much of nepotism. However, right now, the people are still experiencing rampant corruption. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
I mean, the point is not to criticize the previous regime. Maybe the previous regime was accused of so many acts of rampant corruption, which are before the court. However, is it justifiable for the present regime, for the incumbent government to say, look, the previous government was like this, we're better?
Certainly it's not justified. I don't think that just because others did wrong that you have the license to do wrong, and it's certainly not justified. But I would like to say this. I would like to say that there is a huge change from the culture that prevailed previously to the culture that prevails today. And I think nobody can take that away. Just the very fact that there is so much freedom, people are able to talk about issues, people are able to criticize, people are able to discuss, people are able to get on the streets, right, and make their views known. There's certainly a change. You go before the judiciary, you can go with the confidence that you will get a verdict based on the fundamentals of law, rather than the fact that you are facing up to the thing. I'll give you any amount of examples of how this happens, right? Students are protesting, let's say, about Saitam. A very unfortunate incident last night reported that the CEO of Saitam, that assassins tried to get him, but he escaped, which is very, very unfortunate incident, and my sympathies are with the family. Now, that's a situation where, right, people have been battling an issue for decades on the right to private education. And I think there should be private education. The state must be committed to what we call free education, must be committed. And the state must increasingly invest more money in it. The former decade the investments in education came to little over 1.5% of GDP. We in opposition carried slogans saying we're going to take it towards 6%. But we are on the way. We have spent more on education in the last 2 years than they have spent in the previous decade, annually. And we're moving towards 2, we want to move it towards 3% of GDP. Then you got this whole this thing called SITEM, which the previous Rajapaksa regime actually brought to the forefront. They gave the UGC, their government enabled the UGC to provide SITEM the privilege of giving degrees. It is they who did all of this. We inherited this on the 8th of January 2015. We are not opposed to it, right? We want educational standards maintained. We want medical standards being maintained. We were hoping that that place would be recognized and that the students there would be able to sit like any foreign student, the Act 16 examination, and if they qualify, they get registered at the SLMC. What happens? There's no resolution. People oppose it. Students take it to court. The court gives a verdict and says, yes, these students could be provisionally registered. Now, there's a court verdict, and I think the court verdict must be upheld. It must be honored. The rule of law doesn't apply only to politicians. The rule of law applies to every single person. And then you have this unfortunate incident of last night.
What steps have been taken with regard to the shooting? Are you aware of any?
I'm not aware because
it about 9 o'clock last night.
It happened in the night. I'm not aware, but there will certainly be a full investigation to find out actually who's behind it, what really happened.
Let's also talk about particular incidents of recent corruption and lack of procedure. Recently, a fundamental rights petition was filed by Dr. Lalitha Sirigunaruwan to the Supreme Court, alleging that the Hambantota port deal was ultra vires, was against the law. The procedure was unlawful. He spoke of a Southern Development Authority, of which there's a chairman signing agreements, meeting with overseas parties. However, across the board, across political fora, there are ministers, when questioned, who say, look, that's been repealed. These are the contradictions that the people are asking us to put before you.
Yeah, Sonali, certainly if there is something ultra vires in the law, and the courts will uphold it. I have my confidence in that the system is free now and judgments are not given in favor of the courts.
Yeah, but what if it
in
is
favor
the
of the government?
Ministers
who
are acting this way?
Unlawfully
and illegally.
I won't even say that till the verdict is out, right? I would like to see what the verdict is because I haven't examined the particulars of the case myself. But the issue is this: if that's the wrong authority, right? The government of Sri Lanka is committed to it. This will happen via cabinet decisions where it will be taken by the relevant minister into cabinet and cabinet approved and then executed. So if there is something improper about that agreement, certainly we will cure it. Obviously we won't enforce it in an illegal way, you see, and we'll leave that. It's in the hands of the courts and we are open to the verdict of the courts.
Let's talk a bit about procurement procedures.
Yes.
Is there a proper process in place? I mean, we saw how the coal deal, the Lanka Coal Company, how the chairman was asked to go. These are the controversies that people place before you as their elected representatives.
Yeah, Sonali, when it comes to corruption, right, we have a culture of corruption, right. Before I became a politician, I used to think that the politicians were the corrupt people in this country, and everything was to do with politicians. But after being there now for a few years, I realized that it's a culture of corruption. It takes two hands to clap, and there are the bureaucrats who are also very, very corrupt. People come up to me every week and they say, I went to the municipality in Colombo, I went to the municipality in Morto, I went to the municipality in Kotte or some other place. I tried to get a plan passed, I can't get it passed. I've gone for a year, I've gone several times. Then somebody turns up and says, make a payment, you can get it done quickly. So there's a culture of corruption, that's for sure. This culture has built over a period of time. And we have to attack this culture of corruption. Because if the country is to progress, then we have to basically see the end to corruption. But that's a statement. That's not easy. And we have to start with everything. We have to start where we have to start. And certainly we have to make a lot more progress than we have actually made on the culture of corruption. So you refer to particular deals, for example, right? And I would say that these deals need to be challenged. They need to be challenged in the courts, and the courts need to actually decide. The problem is here, one says it's corrupt, somebody else says it's not corrupt. That's in the kind of ongoing debate on many, many different issues. So who actually decides? The courts have to actually decide on it. And we should all have confidence in the court. We can't say, like the students and some other professionals saying that, oh, the courts decided wrong. Somebody has to make a judgment on this. And therefore, I would put my trust in the courts. So if they are saying that that deal is corrupt, the deal is in court, let the courts actually decide. There are always two sides. You take I have looked very carefully at the coal deal, and there are issues which look like processors, to do with processors and all. And then you have the same officials who have decided on this deal, who sat on the previous decades deals as well, right? Who says that this deal is much cleaner than the previous ones, because in the previous coal deals, the same officials are saying that it was not always the best deal, but they went to cabinet and they got the deal overridden, and the cabinet actually gave the deal to a particular company. So what I'm saying is, it's not a question of saying this company or that company and getting into that debate, and I don't want to even enter that debate. But if there is a dispute, right, certainly there are processes in place. Our government, particularly on procurement, right, we have taken one step forward. We've even introduced a procurement commission. But a procurement commission alone won't solve the problem, because you have to have an agency that will then deal with it. We have to move towards e-procurement, right, and that is which will then take away the discretion that is in officials to make decisions. That's the way forward for the country. We need to have a common e-procurement platform. We need to actually invest in an e-procurement platform. It's not easy. It's not just only political will and politicians, right? We have to get the officials around to agreeing to it. India, Bangladesh, and countries like that have made much more progress than we have made. We take on average a year to do a procurement. Some of those countries have reduced it from 3 months to 60 days. In Korea, I am told, right, procurement is done electronically within hours. So I think we can get there. I mean, talking about these issues, raising public awareness about the issues is essential. When we are fighting corruption, we have to fight it with the public, right? With the public, we have to fight corruption. But I would say this, I think it's not good enough to say that there is corruption, there is a problem with it. I think people have to also come up with solutions on how we are going to actually overcome these problems. And that's where I think the problem is, that we are often not agreed on the solutions. I could say here, in revenue collection, right, 87% of government revenue comes from basically few institutions. It comes from the inland revenue, it comes from the customs, it comes from the excise department. These are the three institutions. These three institutions must be electronically linked, right, where people are making payments basically online electronically. And then the revenue generating authority, the treasury in this case, it should be linked. Information should be available. Information should be available to people. We need to take discretion away. That's the way to reduce the leakage in the system. Now that system can't be put right only by a few politicians or ministers. All of us should be looking at the national interest, including the officials in this country. There are a few corrupt government officials at the very high level, right? They are sullying the reputation of the vast majority of government servants who are clean, who want to do an honest job, who have grown up with good values. They are sullying it. But we should all get together, right? We should all get together and foil those attempts of a few people. It's the same in politics. There are a few corrupt politicians, right? But that doesn't mean that the 225 sitting in the Dewan are all corrupt. It's not true. I found that out myself. But we must get together to fight them. Past politicians must be dealt with, but the law must also apply to present politicians. And this responsibility shouldn't just be left with the President and the Prime Minister. This responsibility must be taken by Parliament, led by the Speaker of the House. The responsibility must be taken by the Attorney General and the Attorney General's Department. The responsibility must be taken by the Chief Justice of the country and the judiciary. right? The delays in laws is unacceptable, unacceptable, right? And officials must take responsibility for it too, not just politicians. Everybody, right, who is in authority must take responsibility. Justice delayed is justice denied. And lots of people in this country will say the major problem in this country is that justice is being delayed and it should be executed. Whatever it might be, it doesn't matter who it is. We should be no respecter of persons. The law must be applied. If you are going to leave this, if everybody is accusing politicians and saying politicians are corrupt, then, and you are expecting them to correct the system, they will not correct the system unless others also stand up and say, yes, this is what we are going to do. Therefore, I salute the judiciary where it has taken very difficult and unpopular decisions, and we must stand by it.
Mr. Wickramaratne, you spoke about justice delayed being justice denied. However, it is also the people's executive and legislative powers that vest in the 225 parliamentarians who have been sent to parliament through the franchise of the people. However, there is public perception that the most corrupt are those in power. What is your take on the issue that absolute power leads to absolute corruption? I mean, we see it happening every single day. Every single day it's one expose or the other. That, I mean, on tonight's news there'll be an expose on Newsfirst. For the past few months we've been carrying out exposés, investigative journalism stories on all sorts of corruption, rampant corruption in the incumbent government.
Sonali, it's very unfortunate that the media thinks that its only role is basically to expose what's wrong and it's corruption.
But the media is supposed to be the fourth pillar.
Sonali, if I would complete what I'm trying to say is, I'm saying that it's unfortunate that the media thinks its only role is basically to expose corruption and wrongdoing. I think the media has two roles. One is certainly as a fourth pillar, right, to be the counterbalance to what's happening in the executive arm of government. And I think that's an important role, and that role should be unhindered and happen. But if you look at if you take the print media, on any given day, I haven't seen today's print media, if you take the front pages of the print media and if you have 10 stories in it, you can be sure that 8 or 9 stories are basically exposes, negatives, it's corruption and all. I think the media has a wider role in a society, a much wider role. We also have a positive role. We need to remember that we are building the mindsets of people too, right? And we have a very positive role to play. There are so many positive things happening, right? The other day somebody pointed out to me and showed me an Israeli newspaper, and that particular day there had been a terrorist attack in somewhere in Israel. And the terrorist attack in Israel really got front page, but it got a small box on the front page. The headline was about some scientific discovery made in Israel. So, certainly the media has that role, and I will never deny that role. I always stand for media freedom. But I'm also saying the media has a positive role to play, a building up role to play with the future generation of this country. There are so many good things happening. But if you just read the media and just hear the media out on a day-to-day basis, right, you will only think that what's happening in this country is negative. There are so many positive things happening. So many positive things happening in villages, so many positive things happening in society, but those things are not highlighted. Even this government's successes are not highlighted. Mainly it's only the failings, and I think we should do both. For example, if you take human resources, this government's focus has been move from hard infrastructure to soft infrastructure, move into education. Even in this budget, the finance minister in this budget separated large sums of money, right, to build basic facilities in schools. Yesterday I was with President Sirisena in Moratua, in a prize giving, in a school which is 140 years old. And the President said in 9 out of 10 schools, in nearly 9,000 schools out of the 10,000, there were no basic facilities. He said, when we are reallocating for finances for education, why don't we put it for the basic facilities? I asked him, so what are the basic facilities? He said even things like toilets, water, chairs, desks and things like that are not there. We have also separated to give advanced level school students tabs and computers for 175,000 students, free this year. 28,000 teachers in the A-levels are going to receive tabs and computers to complete the network for them. We have separated money to create 3,500 computer labs this year because we want to connect the young people to the international community. It's not just sort of privileged few. It's not just for my son and my daughter. I think this country's biggest resource is the human resource. We have only 21 million people, one of the smallest countries in Asia. We must invest in our youth. We have separated money to bring 3,500 schools out of the 10,000 and connect them into the internet generation, into the internet. We are bringing a new law, Sonali, this year into Parliament. We are going to say, like it is compulsory for a 5-year-old to go to school, however a mother or a father loves a child, they can't keep a child at home. They have to send. A child has rights. We are bringing another law. Every child, 13 years of compulsory education. A Sri Lankan child can't just drop out of school at the age of 8 or 9, get behind a 3-wheeler just because their father has been driving a 3-wheeler and drive a 3-wheeler. That's not our vision for this country. Our vision is to give every child a higher education, not just the 25,000 who go to state university and some of them spend most of their time on the streets protesting after being a privileged class in this country, because we are putting most of our higher education spend on those 25,000 students. I would like to ask this question. How about all the other students? Out of 10 kids, only 1 go into university. We want to spend on those children and those students too. We want to give them higher. We want to give them technical education, vocational education, or a computer education. If they work in this country, they get a higher income. If they go overseas, they don't go overseas just to work in homes and houses, but they go and work in a better place. So that's the vision. Now, I would say there are so many positive things that are happening, and I think the media has a role to play there too.
We are in conversation with the Deputy Minister, Iran Wickramaratne. As the Deputy Minister pointed out, it is the role of the media not only to point out the flaws of any government, but also the positives, which we at News First and the Capital Maharaja organization believe vehemently in. However, whenever there is corruption, we will expose it, as the media is the watchdog of you, the people. Mr. Wickramaratne, we are on to our final 2 minutes on the show, so I'd just like to ask you, what is your take on a cabinet reshuffle? Do you think it's going to happen anytime soon?
I have absolutely no idea, and I think it's the decision of the executive or the president, whether he thinks it is necessary, so I have absolutely no idea.
A national unity government with the United National Party and the SLFP coming together, do you think it's working?
I think that I will make that judgment only after the 5 years is over. There's one thing that's certain, that this government will continue for 5 years. And
so it's work in progress, is that?
It's work in progress, and I think it's not easy for two big parties who have worked for 60 years, separate from each other, with different agendas, to come together and work. And I think that if we can create national reconciliation, we have really the absence of war now, but not necessarily, we are not necessarily a post-conflict country. I think that we need to move from more majoritarian governance to more democratic governance. And I think this difference is often not understood. People are still crying out for equal rights, equal citizenship, right? And there's work in progress. The President is committed to it, the Prime Minister is committed to it. There's a process in Parliament to create a new constitution. And I think these processes should continue. And one of the reasons for the two big political parties to come together is to tackle some of these big issues. It is unfortunate that for 60 years, some of these issues haven't been tackled. Minorities have been complaining, and the rights and wrongs can be debated, but the very fact that people even have a perception that they're second-class citizens is not good enough. It's not a good foundation to really build a prosperous country. We had moderate Tamil leaders like Chelvanayagam, who had some understanding with SWRD Bandaranayake. That did not work out. He had an understanding, Chelvanayagam had an understanding with Dudley Senayake. That didn't work out. In the year 2000, we saw Chandrika Kumaranutunga Bandaranayake bringing a new constitution.
What's different this time?
That didn't work out. And this is another historic opportunity where before the elections, the President pledged a new order. And he said, we will look at a new order, we will look at a new constitution where every citizen will be equal. I think that's a foundation. There's work in progress, and our government will be judged by the fact that whether we failed or succeeded on big issues like that. That's why we had to come together, and I'm hoping that we will succeed. It's not that any community will be disadvantaged, but that everybody will feel a sense of ownership in a new Sri Lankan identity, and that we will be able to build a prosperous Sri Lanka. My vision for Sri Lanka is not to compare us in the South Asian League, but that we can get to the top of the Southeast Asian League and be among the first few countries in Asia, right, where every person has an equal opportunity and every person feels a sense of belonging and equality.
Thank you very much. We leave you very hopefully for the future of Sri Lanka, right? Thank you, Mr. Iran Vikramaratne, for joining us on this edition of Newsline. I leave you this morning with a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States of America, who said, "To sit home, read one's favorite newspaper, and scoff at the misdeeds of the men who do things is easy. But it is markedly ineffective. It is what evil men count upon the good men and good women doing." Sri Lanka, the time has come to do your part. Thank you for joining us.